To the American Organization for Bodywork Therapies of Asia, the February 2023 Connect and Learn webinar. I'm your host, Brian Scow, AOBTA Communications Coordinator, and with me, taking care of all else, is Wayne Mylan, AOBTA Managing Director. I'm pleased to have Chris McAlister as our guest today. Chris first encountered Oriental Medicine in 1986 while extremely sick in East Asia. Treatment sessions with practitioners from Tibetan, Ayurvedic, homeopathic, and finally Chinese medicine showed him the immediate and long-term benefits of traditional holistic practices. He began his formal Shiatsu studies in the UK with Nigel Dawes and Liz Arundel. Chris continued his studies during a 5-year stay in Japan with Takeo Suzuki, a student of Masunaga and principal teacher at the Iokai Shiatsu Center. Chris has also studied acupuncture, qigong, martial arts, and taiji chuan with, among others, Chen Pei Shan, the 21st generation lineage holder with the Chen family traditional style. In Europe, he studied Chinese herbs with Ted Kapchuk. Chris eventually settled down in Sweden, where he has been teaching and treating ever since. Chris has taught Shiatsu extensively in Israel, Italy, Norway, the UK, and the USA. In 2020, he presented at the ECF conference in Amsterdam. His passion is for the inner tradition of the Oriental arts. He enjoys nothing more than researching and practicing with colleagues, students, and patients in the world of ideas and in dream states. Chris is currently president of the ESF, the European Shiatsu Federation, and in 2021 co-published Touching the Invisible, Exploring the Path of Shiatsu. When not practicing, he enjoys all forms of writing, swimming, singing, drumming, and dancing. Chris has a new book that has come out just recently, The Poetry of Touch, Alchemy, Transformation, and Oriental Medicine. We'll get an introduction to the book today and dive into a special topic therein, Ling, the Numinous Universal Soul Energy. So take it away, Chris.
Wow, thank you, Brian. Wonderful. Yeah, sorry for that lengthy introduction, folks. I'm just Chris, and I do have a new book out, and it's slowly making it out into the stores in various forms. And right now it's out as and audiobook, and any day I hope it'll be out as a regular paper book. That's what I'm waiting for, and I know other people are as well. So today what we're going to do is take a very quick look at the book, basically the cover, and if there's any questions about the book, then fire away or save them till the end. That's perfectly fine, however you feel like that. What we'll do is dive into this subject, the Ling, which is very close to my heart and probably close to yours, whether you know it or not, but hopefully soon you will. And do some practice around that. It's a little bit of theoretical practice, but mostly hands-on practice in the form of finding the points and also doing some qigong, which came through just over a year ago. And I'll tell you the story how that came about and all the stories around it as we get going. Right now, I would like to share my screen, which I'm going to do without further ado. Just show you briefly the cover of the book. That's the audiobook cover. I hope you can see that. And it's the there's the website. You can find out all about the book and what's going on with it, and bits and pieces, reviews and stuff like that. This is the final page of the PowerPoint presentation, which I put together for you for today, and we'll end up there at the end. But right now, let's go to the very beginning of the presentation and join the Ling, the Numinous. That character there is written by, calligraphed by Alan Tosh, who's a guy in France, Aikido and Kendo, I think, practitioner, but above all, Shiatsu practitioner in this case. And he has something called Atelier Shiatsu, and he does these amazing calligraphy. So I purchased that from him. It's the best I've ever seen of this character because it has accuracy, it has balance, but it has flow as well. And that's what you look for in calligraphy. It's what I look for anyway. And we'll go through the character in a second or two. We'll break it down and look at the different parts of it. And we'll be using that in the Qigong, the different parts of the character. But right now, there it is in its beauty. It's on the cover of the book. So obviously it means quite a lot to the process of the book, the things that have been going on for me during the writing of it, and the things that I hope are embodied in the book for you to unwrap and enjoy. The Numinous, those two words there, the Numinous, is a way of translating Ling, which comes from a Western spiritual tradition, a Western traditional writer. And the Numinous suggests something that's shining from within and quite huge and untouchable and indescribable. So that's an excellent word to describe Ling. We'll get into more sorts of describing words for Ling. One way to talk about it is universal soul energy. And Ling is the Chinese way of saying this character. The Japanese way of saying it is Rei, and you've all met that in the formulation Reiki. So we can imagine that the practitioner who put together what we know of as Reiki was very in touch with this kind of energy. And it says a lot about the process that he was in, that he chose this word to represent the energy of what he was doing and what he wanted to spread to people around him. So universal soul energy is one way of describing Ling, and it's certainly not the only way, and it may not even be the best way, but let's see if it works, at least for the time being. I'm going to take you to the next slide, folks, so bear with me, and you'll see the same character, but you'll see it written in a much more schematic way. This is not calligraphy, this is just the bare bones of the character, but we can see it even more clearly what it represents. 3 levels of meaning. Here's the character and its components then. Chinese characters, some of you know this for sure, some of you are not so familiar with it. Chinese characters are made up of other characters usually, and the component parts always mean something, even if it's just the sound. In this case, they really do have meaning, and you've probably gone ahead of me and started to read the different parts of it, but we'll take it in order anyway. The upper part here means precipitation, anything that comes from above, emanating from above. I've written there. It could mean snow, it could mean rain, it could mean fog, it could mean lightning, it could be anything that comes from above in the form of precipitation, and there's a kind of energy moving from up to down. The middle part here is 3 little boxes, and those 3 little boxes can mean many different things. They can mean gifts, packages, little things full of nice stuff. They can mean entryways or exits just as easily. You'll see it on the subway line. It's used there as well. It could also be mouths, because that's also the character for mouth. Open in awe. Why would these mouths be open in awe? Well, because something's coming from above, and they are in the presence, these people, of the shaman. So obviously this character has a long and dignified history, going back into the roots of Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine changed around the time of the Neijing. Anybody who studied with Ted Kapchik is well conversing with this fact. There have been shifts in Chinese medicine. The modern TCM shift was one such, under the influence of Marxist materialism, etc., etc. And most of us are fairly negatively attituded towards that shift. This shift was just as negative and just as positive in its own way. The shift from the shamanic into the systemic around the time of the Neijing, and it's not well known in our tradition, but it's well known by people who've studied it. It was a shift to try and make Chinese medicine more medical, more cosmological, in a more ordered way, and come away from the spirits and the shamanic way of doing things, which was the root of Chinese medicine, of course, the root of all medicine. This character brings us all the way back around full circle into the shamanic roots of Chinese medicine. And that's not a bad thing. And I think that one of the things I've been interested in the last 15, 20 years is exactly that, return to the roots and the roots of the roots within our tradition. So that's the character itself and the 3 components of the meaning, which of course is larger than its 3 parts. And we'll move on into the next, and we'll look at some of the characters, some of the people who've commented on this. The Tao Te Ching has commented that when Shen attains the one, it becomes Ling. So in a sense, Ling is beyond Shen. However, we can approach that conceptually, very difficult to approach it really. But just the statement itself kind of shines a light on what we're dealing with here in a certain sense. Father Bruno Barnhart said, "Spirit does exactly what it must do, permeates the ground like rain, disappears into the body of humanity." These are little poetic snatches that give us little hints about the kind of energies that we're dealing with here. Now I want to tell you a story. That little scenario, that little tableau you're looking at there is a section of a chest of cupboards, which we have here at my clinic, which I had built for me, purpose built by a carpenter, a very skilled carpenter. And you'll see a bunch of odds and ends. That's from Bali, for example. That's a present from my birthday last year, where there's a rose from somewhere. These little shells and things are from Bali as well, I seem to remember. This little figurine here turned up at exactly the same time as the Qigong form that we're going to be doing later on. In fact, just a couple of days later. And there's a whole level of story here. And it'll make more sense to you once we've started to do the exercises. And you'll recognize the posture that she's in there. I say she because it's fairly obvious it's a female figurine we're talking about there. You'll recognize that posture from the very first exercise that we do in the Ling Gong, as I call it. But I didn't know about this figurine. I'd never heard of such a figurine before I found her in a second-hand shop 2 days after the form had invented itself through me. So there's an enormous amount of synchronicity embodied there. So she's our little Ling figurine, our Ling goddess, and she'll be figuring in a few more of these slides as we go along in different tableaus. There's one, for example, as from my clinic treatment room. Spiritual efficacy. Rudolf Otto is the person who coined the phrase the Numinous, and it was done in his book Das Heilige, the Holy. And he was of the opinion that Ling is used in compounds, Chinese compounds, where you put 2 or more characters together. That's a compound that suggests the spiritual efficacy of gods, ancestral spirits, and ghosts. For example, their power to effect the seemingly miraculous, also to arouse awe, dread, and fascination. Now that word miraculous and awe, if we go back just 2 slides, remember the mouths here open in awe. So within this, there are certain levels of miraculous surprise. And he wanted to draw attention to that, obviously, and drew inspiration and reference from his knowledge of Chinese language, not Chinese medicine. This is a person who doesn't know anything about Chinese medicine necessarily, but Chinese spirituality and Chinese culture would be his area of expertise. And that's what he had to say about the whole thing there. Moving on very rapidly, we have again our Ling figure. Then we have Gongzi, Confucius. Shun, the great sage king, merely placed himself gravely and reverently with his face due south. That was all. With correct comportment, no commands are necessary. Comportment means behavior, posture, the way of carrying oneself, of being. Affairs proceed as if they were carried out by no one. That is the power of Ling. So we're looking at different aspects of Ling, how different people have phrased it, approached it, tried to harness aspects of it, describe different features of the composite thing that we call Ling, that we really don't know very much about yet, or some of you do maybe. So we're approaching it through the commentaries coming down through the ages. Now we're going to approach it through the acupoints on the body. There are 5 of them. And we'll approach from the top, i.e. from the head. Gallbladder 18 is a point called Cheng Ling. You can see the words here. Cheng Ling means Ling support, or support Ling. And some of you might be thinking, whoa, wait a second. Gallbladder has a spiritual point. We don't think of the gallbladder as being an ultra spiritual meridian, but here it is, folks. The first point, the uppermost point, let's put it that way. The painting that you'll see here, this is actually a painting like 1/2 meter by 1/2 meter. That's just a tiny pictorial representation of it. That painting was done by a woman I know, an artist, female artist from Chile. And I asked her specifically, I commissioned her to paint me 5 pictures based on her impressions as I activated these points during a treatment with her. She had no experience of shiatsu, no experience of getting treatments at all, in fact, and didn't understand really what she was getting into. However, she did react to these points. And as you can see there, what that is representing, among other things on different levels, is the 2 halves of her brain meeting and becoming more integrated with each other. That's what her experience of that point was. Now, That's not to say that everybody would experience the point in that way. It's not to say that anybody else would experience the point in that way, but it is the way she experienced it. And then that was her pictorial representation of it through her art. And mighty beautiful it is as well. Gallbladder 18, you can find it very easily by just touching the top of your head, either side of governor 20. So you find governor 20 at the top, most of you know where that is, and then just at the side, in line with the pupils, so find the pupil line from your eyes and go straight up and cross the line that's coming out from governor 20, bang, there it is. Cheng Ling, supporting the Ling, or Ling, supporting, whichever way around you want to put that, because there's a verb in there somewhere, but nobody knows who's supporting what or when, really. So the Chinese often leave things like that open to interpretation, and that is part of the poetry of our approach. It's part of the freedom and the creativity of our approach, and that's why my book is called The Poetry of Touch. There's a creative aspect to every single thing that we do. There's an element of interpretation to every single thing we do. And when we explain things, we tend to do so in the form of images, metaphor, and of course, poetry. All of our sacred texts are written as poetry, in fact, when it comes down to it. Moving on, folks, to the next point in line. It's on the back, it's in the spine, and it's governor vessel 10. And you can see from there, it's right, very, very close to the lower tip of the shoulder blades. And it's just above the level of the diaphragm shoe point and just below the level of the heart shoe point. So it's just below the point that we know as Shandao, which is governor vessel 11. This is governor 10, and it's a much more obscure point, rarely named. And there's the name of it, folks, Ling Tai, governor 10, or Du 10, for those of you who use that denomination. And Tai means tower. It also means plateau, and it means platform. So it means all three of those things. The books will tell you tower or platform, but in fact, students in Israel reported that it was much more to do with the plateau, which is quite interesting. Once again, we have the picture here, written, drawn by the same person, painted, in fact, by the same person, Ana Maria from Chile. This one was karmic. This one opened up layers of karmic energy to do with her parents in Chile and situations that happened there, misunderstandings, disappointments, things that really didn't go that well between her parents in a certain situation, in a catastrophic macro situation, which you can probably imagine, Chile in the early 1970s. And as I touched and held this point for her, all of those memories opened up for her, but they opened up in a new way and settled into a new balance for her so she could move on from them and find a new way forward, and a kind of resolution to a certain extent, to a certain level from that. And yeah, you can pretty much read this as the vertebra of the spine moving and opening, and in fact, in a certain extent, expanding. And you could even take this to be the space between the shoulder blades here. So it's kind of an anatomical image, but it has this opening and this fiery flaming going up from the Ling Tai point up through Shandao and up and out from there. So it's an amazing picture, in a sense, poetically capturing some of that process that she was undergoing there. So she was very, very surprised that this kind of thing was going on with her, because, as I said, she had no experience of acupressure, shiatsu, any of these things, or even massage, really. And touch was not something she was used to in a therapeutic sense. So all of this was quite revelationary for her, and quite an interesting process, I believe, for her. To find the point, what you'll need to do is, and we'll go through this, of course, in more detail in a moment, but all you need to do is bring your arms to the side at a 90-degree angle. So your elbows point downwards and outwards, and your fingertips point to the ceiling. That brings your shoulder blades to the level of thoracic 7. Now, if you feel with your shoulder blade and then go into thoracic 7, just go into the space above thoracic 7, you will be on Ling Tai, governor 10. So it's just fractionally within the space enclosed by the shoulder blades themselves. So it's within that area that we usually call the upper heater. It's close to the heart shoe points, but it's also close to the diaphragm shoe points, and both are equally important, I think, in this case. Moving on.
Take this, Brian.
Yeah. Go ahead.
About this one. So the previous point, support, that has a certain meaning that comes forth. And then this point, tower, platform, plateau, would you say that's encouraging a certain large view, or what is the meaning of this?
Yeah, well, it's depending on which aspect of it you connect with. I think it has, if you connect with the tower aspect, it gives you a panoramic perspective. If you connect with the platform, it gives you a way of holding a high space. And if you think of plateau, it gives you a very wide aspect to your situation. There's also another aspect here, and that is that it may well be, in one specific sense, a platform for Shen Dao and the Shen, which are just above it. So all of those things could be involved. What I wouldn't like to do is define it any more closely than that, because I'm very keen for you to get your own experience of it once we start the Qigong and we connect with the energy itself. And then you'll be able to tell me, right? That's where we go from there. Excellent question. Thank you. And anybody who has questions like that, just do as Brian did. Fire away. This is all good. Meanwhile, I'll move on and show you a extremely muscular six-pack there. Definitely in the shade of whoever that is. But we're on the front of the body now. We're on the Ling yin aspect. We've been on the top of the head and the back. That's very yang, right? So we've begun with the yang. Now we're moving into the yin. So we're going deeper in a certain sense. We're on the kidney meridian, so it doesn't get much deeper than that. We're on the chest. Now, this particular area of the body is where the kidney and the heart energies are closest. And this is, in fact, the nodal area of the Tai Yin, where the kidney and the heart work together, if you're interested in those greater meridians where kidney and heart are one, and where they represent the most meaty, bodily, earthy part of the human existence, and the most ethereal, spiritual, godly part in one, Tai Yin, the great hidden yin. So that's part of the nodal area of that greater meridian. So it couldn't be better placed in terms of its heavy spirituality. Ceremonial mound is my translation for shoe. Some people call it hill. Some people call it burial ground. I'm not particularly keen on those translations. They don't quite give me what I want out of it. I want to give you the idea that there are certain aspects of ritual, of ceremony, that may be connected with this. And not to get wrapped up in ceremony or ritual, of course, but there is a certain way in which we harness our attention and our focus in a spiritual sense. And we don't have to wear robes or put special hats on or anything like that. We don't have to say special mantras or any of that kind of stuff. And yet there is a way that we can harness our focus in a spiritual sense. And I think that is where I would like to take you with the Qigong and with all of the words that I'm using and the poetry that I'm using during this presentation. You'll see very clearly that it's one space above the level of conception vessel 17, or Ren 17, as some people like to say it, Shanzhong, chest center. This is one space above, so it's level with conception vessel 18, in fact, which doesn't have very much importance, but it's just a guideline for you to find it. Sits there beside the chest bone, and Ling's ceremonial mound was drawn rather in this way by Anna Maria. And that's kind of, for me, that is an embodiment of something very, very geographic. It shows the ceremonial mounds as two. So that could be the breasts, it could be the chest, the pectoral shape itself, but it's also kind of an innocent way of expressing that idea of a hill. And she didn't know this, but very close to where I live, there are two small hills just like that, where I go quite often for walks and sitting down and connecting with the earth, etc. So that has a special meaning for me personally, although she didn't know anything about that. Kidney 24, we will of course be doing an exercise to do with that, just as we will all of the other points in the Ling family. Moving on to the next point, we go even more yin in the sense that we go out to the heart meridian and we have heart 2. Here's the little finger, going up just above the elbow, 3 Tsun above the elbow. We have heart 2 here. Qing Ling. Qing means blue-green. Now, blue-green might not be any kind of special color for most of us, but in Chinese medicine, it seems to be a special color because it indicates something to do with alchemy. Now, again, you can understand why that meant a special something for me, who has a special interest for the alchemical part of our tradition, the transformative part, the transforming of base into spirit, of the 3 treasures, etc., etc. All of those different types of transformations that we are interested in with our patients and with ourselves and with the world in general, with life. And you can see that her picture of it is this transforming of buds into small flowers at a very, very early form of time of spring. So that's like a plum blossom or almond blossom, something of that nature, very, very early in the springtime, before the leaves sprout, the flower sprouts. It's a very early and fragile, but also extremely powerful form of alchemy because it comes during the cold weather. None of those thoughts, I'm sure, occurred to her while she was painting it, but they do occur to me afterwards. And you have the gold color there, which is one of the primary symbols for alchemy, lead to gold, of course. Itself a poetic image. Heart 2, we'll be finding that as we go along. And blue-green is part of the little mythology that grew up around this whole Ling thing. You remember the Ling figurine that I mentioned earlier on that I found 2 days after the Qigong movements came to me? That very same day in that very same shop, but only 2 minutes later, I found a blue-green shirt, which I treasure and is one of my absolute favorites. The whole thing was just like layers and layers of synchronicity and meaning and just fun. So blue-green Ling, heart 2. Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, are you
Yeah.
aware of the translation of Qingling as being, or maybe this is a transliteration too, the palace in the terrace in the palace where the emperor would go to seek inspiration from the spirits. Had you ever heard that story?
That sounds like a Lonnie Jarrett thing, is it?
Yeah, that's a Lonnie Jarrett thing.
Yeah, Lonnie
Yeah.
tends to do that. He'll tend to spin a poem out of the things that he knows, and it sounds like it's definitely along the right lines, doesn't it? Whether or not it's factually true, I don't know if we need to even discuss, but it's a very, very nice image to use in this context. Absolutely wonderful. So thanks for bringing that up. Was that Matthew?
Yes.
Or was that Brian? Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, lovely, lovely. Beautiful stuff. Great. So all of these interjections are superb, people. Wonderful. Keep it on. The way of Ling, Ling Dao is our final point, the last one of the 5, and it's right down near the wrist. And it's a point which tends to get overlooked, as most of these Ling points do. I'm sure none of you will overlook them after this, but at this point, it's very much been in the shadow of Heart 7, for example, Shen Men. Everybody knows Heart 7, Shen Men. Everybody uses Heart 7, Shen Men. Some people know Heart 6, Yin Shi, the Shi clef point. Some people know the number 5, the Law point. Hardly anybody knows Heart 4. It's the metal point, which is not that interesting for me at this point, although it is for some people. What's massively interesting for me is its name, Ling Dao. That you can't get a stronger name than that in Chinese medicine. That's like one of the big hitters. The way of Ling, right down there near the wrist. And of course, we have a Qigong exercise designed to activate and open that point. And there's her picture of it, like this absolutely gorgeously radiating, blossoming tree, full of blossom, and probably not much of a leaf in sight, just pure flower, different colors. So that's an imaginary kind of tree. I don't know if we've any of us seen that kind of a tree in real life. Dark background. You would probably say that's not a very realistic picture of a tree. I'd be the first to agree with you, but that doesn't matter. It's a pictorial representation. It's a symbolic representation of a kind of energy, the kind of energy that she felt as we were treating that final point, Heart 4, Ling Dao on her arm. So very easy to find. It's just like 1.5 Tsun up from the wrist, and extremely easy to find, extremely easy to activate, and a lovely point. But as I say, often overlooked in the shadow of Heart 7, and Perhaps rightly so, who's to say? But I have a sneaky feeling that certain people will be looking at Heart 4 with a slightly renewed interest in the days and weeks and perhaps months to come. So in just a few short moments, we will get into those Qigong exercises after probably a few questions or a few observations. Right now, I'd just like to take you to this slide here, and we're back to the original calligraphy, which Alain did in Paris for me. I've just framed it slightly differently there. And this is a few words that came to me when I really started to seriously get interested in the Ling, research the points and do this stuff about 5-6 years ago. So perhaps Ling means oneness, feeling that all of nature is independent, interconnected, living and timeless universal energy field that sustains life, while guiding the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. Now, from that kind of a description, we understand that this is not an easily contained thing. This is not an easily summed up or described thing. It's not easy to define something like this. You can see how many words I use to describe that, and it's far too many, of course. But then again, what are you going to do? There's so many aspects to Ling, and I've written a whole chapter in the book about it. And in that chapter is a brief run through of the points, of course. But more importantly, a series of case stories, let's call them, of people who I've encountered and used these points with, treated them either in treatment sessions or in classes, and the stories that have come out. And you'll see that this idea of timeless is really important here, because prophets throughout the years, throughout this millennia, have told us that there's no such thing as time. There's only now. And that's such a difficult concept to grasp, because we're so rooted in time. We're so controlled by time. We're so time conscious. I am at this very moment conscious of the time ticking away. And, you know, I've got things that I want to do in this presentation. You've got things you want to do afterwards, etc. There's time aspects to everything that we do, more or less. However, everything that we've ever experienced can only be experienced now. Everything that will ever come can only be experienced in the moment it happens. So there is a certain truth to that thing about time being only now. And Ling is one of the kind of energies that really brings that home to us. So this practice of using these 5 points, the practice of doing this Qigong around these 5 points and the energy of the character as I see it, as I understand it, hopefully, perhaps can connect us to this interdependent, interconnected, living and timeless universal energy field that sustains life while guiding the evolution of consciousness. I don't know about you, but for me, that's a kind of an optimistic take on the process that we're all involved with and that we're all partake of guiding the evolution of consciousness. We who do Shiatsu are part of that in a really, really big way. And sometimes I think we lose contact with that in the day-to-day business of helping people with pain in their back and headaches and menstrual cramps and things like this. And fine, those things really do need to be taken care of. But there's a bigger picture, and that's what the Ling is there to remind us about, I think, possibly. So anyway, no need to dwell on that. We go to the next slide, and there's the Ling in the background now. It's moved into the background so that we can focus on this poem, or a section of a poem called The Unity of the Three, which I came across some years ago. And it only caught my attention because of this word, this illuminate here, and this luminaries, and this word here, numinous. So let's have a read together. Innerly nourish yourself, serene and quiescent in empty non-being. Going back to the fundament, conceal your light and innerly illuminate your body. Shut the openings and raise and strengthen the numinous trunk. As the 3 luminaries sink into the ground, warmly nourish the pearl. Watching, you do not see it. It is nearby and easy to seek. Know the white, keep to the black, and the numinous light will come of its own. Folks, those kind of lines are open to all sorts of interpretations. So far be it from me to limit you to one interpretation, and that's exactly what I don't intend to do. However, I will leave that with you, and it's in the presentation. You'll receive it afterwards. Wayne's promised to send that out with the recording, etc., etc. So ponder that at your leisure. The Unity of the Three is one of those old Taoist canon texts, poems, if you like, extended poems. And this is just a small chunk of it that I took out. It appealed to me few years ago, 2-3 years ago, I guess. So I thought I'd just introduce that to you, and that's there for your enjoyment. And there we are, back where we started, and ready for some interaction. What I might do very, very briefly is go back to the points. So if anybody has any questions about the location of the points, fire away, please. In fact, what I'll do is ask you all if gallbladder 18 feels comfortable enough to find on yourself. As we said, just straight out from Governor 20 at the top of the head, Bai Hui, the 100 meetings, and in line with the pupils, so very much in line with the gallbladder alignment. So that shouldn't be too difficult, I guess, for people to find. And if you can't find it, just guess, as usual. Fake it till you make it, right? No problem with that. Ling Tai, we said that that would be if you take your arms out to the side and have your arms going straight out from your shoulders horizontally and your hands at right angles going up to the ceiling, then your shoulder blade is in line now. The tip of your shoulder blade is in line with your 7th cervical vertebra, and just above the 7th cervical vertebra is this point here, Ling Tai, Ling plateau or tower or platform, depending on which interpretation grabs you in the practice of it. And we will be practicing with that very, very shortly. Moving on, we go back to kidney 24, and that's if you'll find the very slight divot in the chest bone, about 2/3 of the way down from the throat hollow to the tip of the xiphoid process. About 2/3 of the way down is that little divot in the chest, the breastbone. So go out and then up to the next space in between the ribs. You'll be on Ling Shu, kidney 24. So another point that's not that difficult to find, quite easy, relatively speaking. We go out to the arm and we find that by placing 4 fingers on the elbow, the piece of bone that sticks out at the elbow, and staying very far back in line with the little finger and the very, very, very soft tissue of the upper arm there. And if you feel it without a sleeve, the flesh will be very, very soft. We call this the baby flesh, right? It's almost untouched, and that's exactly as it should be. The heart meridian protected by every single layer of meridian from the heart protector going outwards in the arm. So that's exactly as we would like it to be. Qing Ling. And then we have that beautiful image that Matthew provided coming from Lonnie Jarrett there. The blue-green Ling, for those of you who like the color of blue-green, which is a dark kind of turquoise, it seems to be. Teal is one way of describing that, but it could be any shade. And then down by your wrist, if you find Shen Men, which is at the wrist, you'll just need to go up 3 little finger-sized spaces, and you'll be on heart 4. Ling Dao, the way of Ling, or the path of Ling, depending on how you translate Dao, of course. So there we have it, folks. We have those 5 points. I'm going to take away the document now, the PowerPoint, so you can see me. And if there's any questions, pipe up. We welcome Deborah. Hey, Deborah. And if there are any questions at all about what we've discussed so far, there's something on the chat. Let's have a quick look and see what that is. Kairos. What on earth does that mean? Matthew, you might
Kairos is a Greek term. Yeah, Kairos is a Greek term. And you see it sometimes when you go to a film that was made by the production company of Kairos, where the god is shooting the arrow through the eyelets of like 6 eyes in a row, and he's shooting it straight through. And so Kairos is the Greek image of the exact right timing. The precision and the precise timing to just be there, and it's out of time actually. So when you were talking about that out of time, timelessness, I was reminded of Kairos, because it's that word captures to me that out of time, but perfect timing.
Excellent. I'll be looking at that for sure. Thank you. Great image.
Yeah.
I have a question as well
Yes, Cordula.
about actually about the language. The word Ling. You mentioned that there was you mentioned from chapter 39 in the Tao Te Ching. There was it was mentioned Ling, and also from a German book from a German author, Rudolf Otto. I happen to have this book, but I don't happen to have read it yet. but I was just briefly looking in the how do you call that, the index and did you find the word Ling mentioned in the English translation?
Yes. I don't have the translation. This is a reference that I got when I was trawling the net looking for anything and everything about Ling.
So I'm just curious to know if the word Ling is mentioned. So there's many translations of the Tao Te Ching, and also I think of the there is also always many translations. But I was just wondering if the word Ling has appeared in these translations.
Well, it should be in the originals, not in the translations. But I don't know how people have then translated those things. You know what I mean? Tao Te Ching, there's like 100 different translations, and they're all quite different, and they all emphasize different things depending on the lenses of the people doing the translation. So however people translate Ling, that would be up to them, wouldn't it? And
yeah, but that's the whole mystery about it, and the whole mistake is often that we don't really understand what is meant.
Right, which is my jump off point, because I'd known about this word Ling for a long time, as most of you have probably heard of it for a long time as well. But then I decided to investigate it because, as usual, you look superficially and there's no real good explanation. So, and there's also different translations. Some people just say spirit, and some people just write soul, and that doesn't help because we know there's different types of spirit and different types of soul in Chinese medicine. We know there's a lot of nuances around these words, right? So we need to be a bit more careful about which kind of soul, which kind of spirit we're talking about. So as I looked more into it, I realized this is a lot more than, well, it's a lot different, let's say, to Shen. And it's certainly nothing like Hun or Po, which tend to get the word soul attached to them. Ephemeral soul and animal soul, for example. Whereas Shen tends to get, I translate it as spirit. Some people translate it as mind, which for me is, okay, whatever. So
when you mention the chapter 39, when Shen attains the one, it becomes Ling. Do you have this translation?
No, this is, well, in the original that it would say Shen blah 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 Ling. That would be the Chinese version of that, right? And there would be very little punctuation in there. So there's a lot of room for interpretation, a lot. The Neijing is notorious for being like, open to all sorts of interpretations. But that, I think, is a translation that maybe Lonnie did. I think I might have got that from Lonnie. I'm not sure exactly where it came from. But please look, and if you can have a look in the versions that you have of the Tao Te Ching.
Yes, I will.
And you can tell us how that's been done, because it's tricky, isn't it, to translate those words if you don't have an idea of what they might mean. Then you'll just be saying spirit becomes spirit. Huh? What does that mean? That's nonsense for a reader who doesn't have any background. So this is the responsibility of people doing translation. They need to be.
But sorry, Chris, this will be the only place where Shen and Ling are mentioned together?
One of the only places, but certainly not the only.
Okay.
Look, a lot of stuff from ancient Chinese is lost. A lot of it's not translated yet. There's somebody called Sabina Wilms who does a lot of translations. She got Happy Goat Productions, it's called. And she might be the kind of person who have opinions about this kind of thing. Very well-founded, well-grounded, well-read opinions about this kind of thing. So that would be a kind of person you could follow up with questions or reading her materials or whatever.
Could I share an experience about working with Kidney 24?
Who's speaking here? Is it Alex?
Deborah.
Deborah. Hi, Deborah.
I several times working with Kidney 24 with people with acupressure, they've experienced an opening as that point opens.
Yeah.
And in particular, a couple of experiences. One person had a sense of, and I love the name spirit, you know, burial mound, right? Had an experience of a pile of rocks sitting on his chest.
Right.
And there were grudges. And as he took grudge off, he got lighter, right?
Okay.
The second one was a person who had an experience of an opening and feeling like the stone was rolled away from his tomb and he came out from there. So I experienced that also as, I kind of interpret it as the you know, kidney can be suppressing the heart, you know.
Yeah, I mean, things can get pretty heavy, right? When everything is stacked up like that. So that would be a sign of, that will be a actual occasion of rebirth for those two individuals that you mentioned, Deborah. Wonderful. Lovely. Buried alive, huh? Good. Excellent. Any more?
I just said, throw it in the burial vault. You know, we put so much in the vault, and prying the lid off of that burial vault, lots of latent content can emerge.
Well, I love the fact that one guy that it was grudges, that he had stacked, right, his own grudges on top of his own heart, you know, that was holding him down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we do our best, but sometimes our best is actually working against us. But there you go. What do? We work with the tools we have, right? But you gave him some new tools there, so that's fantastic. This is what I mean by the alchemy of Chinese medicine. That kind of thing, you can barely explain it in a rational sense. And it certainly doesn't make any logical sense unless you understand the logic of Chinese medicine and the logic of alchemy. Then it makes perfect sense, right? It's like, oh yeah, of course. It's just poetic logic rather than some sort of binary logic, which tends to limit things. Our logic tends to open things up because it gives us the freedom to follow the poetry, follow the imagery, follow the metaphors and see where they lead us. Oh, look, an amazing thing happened. We don't need to be limited by material concerns. We can allow the poetry to lead us into complete freedom and things that we've never even imagined we could achieve. And that can happen on your mat at any time, or your table or whatever. Yeah. Wonderful.
How did you phrase that, Chris? The logic of what? The logic of, I've just missed the word.
Of Chinese medicine.
There's a logic. Yeah.
See, people look at Chinese medicine sometimes and they say, oh, that's nonsense, because it doesn't obey the logic of this so-called scientific paradigm, which has been dominating us for 300-400 years. But that's to ignore the fact that it has its own logic, an inherent logic, which makes perfect sense as long as you understand it, or at least certain parts of it. So when I was talking earlier on about that switch that happened around the time of the Neijing, and this is the kind of stuff that Ted Kapchuk teaches you about if you hang around with him for any length of time. The switch was to make this jumble of otherworldly, shamanic, spiritual knowledge, which is so untamable, into something much more manageable. A cosmology that's where, we've got yin and yang, excellent. Okay, so we've got a binary system, brilliant. And then we've got what? 5 elements. Love it. 12 meridians. Fantastic. Suddenly we've got rules. We've got like these kind of integers. We've got things that we can kind of count and line up and, oh, look, we've got a system here. It looks great. But even that is limiting if we allow it to limit us. It gives prison bars where we should be flying out into the cosmos. But of course, when we start to teach people, we need these aspects of pedagogy. We need yin and yang. We need 5 elements. We need 12 meridians, 8 extraordinary vessels. Why not? 4 C's, keep going. All of that leads you inexorably to this magic that's behind it all, which is just begging us to connect with it. And that's what we're doing. with the Ling. And the Ling just says, hey, no rules, none. Get into this, and then everything is possible. You can't stay there all the time, of course. You have to live your life, you have to pay your bills, you have to drive your car on the street and not kill pedestrians. We understand that part, yes, definitely. We're not levitating yet, but don't forget that we are involved in this evolution of consciousness. We're part of that. So this is very, very much part of our mission statement, as far as I'm concerned, of what Shiatsu is, what Oriental medicine is, what acupuncture is, and of course, what Qigong is. Radical statements flowing out here. Shall we do some Qigong, folks? How about that? Yeah, exactly, Matthew. Right, exactly like that. What I'm going to do, I think, is to ask you to mute yourselves, those who aren't already, but most of you are very nicely, thank you. I'm going to pull my camera down so you can see me sitting on my mat down here, and I'll lead you through these exercises with as clear instructions as possible. And these are very, very simple exercises, so there shouldn't really be any need for questions, but we'll take questions afterwards if that's okay, so that we can enjoy the depth of the process and the practice together now as we go into it. So let me set that up. Down we go. And yes, it's a seated practice if you want it to be. If you want to stand up and do this, be my guest. By all means, there's no limit. And you'll find that there are very, very few limits in this practice. And the way it came to me was completely spontaneous. I was actually doing a treatment on somebody, and I was finishing off the treatment using the 5 Ling points. And I'd gotten over from the one side, having done heart 4 and heart 2 on the one side, on the woman's right side. And I was on her left side. This is my standard practice. I tend to do the non-heart side first and then the heart side. So the heart gets plenty of notice that I'm coming in its general direction. It may be an exaggeration, but it's the way I feel to do things. So I do it that way. So here I was, having treated heart 2, and now treating heart 4 with just one hand, and the other hand was grounding at the side. Now my left hand was touching heart 4, Ling Dao. My right hand was free. My right hand suddenly started to tell me that it wanted to do something. It wanted to move, and it showed me this movement that was coming up like this. And I thought, whoa, maybe not now. We're in the middle of a treatment, well, the end of a treatment, but it's not really appropriate to be doing things like that during the treatment. Can we do this afterwards? Would that be okay? And that seemed to be okay. The hand settled down again. It was calm. Treatment finished. Off she went. Back I came. Door closed. What did you want to do, arm? It wanted to do this with the other arm as well. And this is the first movement that we'll be doing together, folks. I'm just going to take my camera up a tiny little bit so that you see me more clearly. So for me, this has always been a seating practice because I started doing it sitting down and I carried on doing it sitting down. If you want to sit on a chair, perfectly fine. Sit on a stool, wonderful. If you want to stand up and do it, great. I wouldn't suggest trying to do it lying down unless there's no other option. But that's completely up to you. You'll find one of the exercises extremely difficult, namely. All the others will be fine, but that one will be difficult. Now, if lying down is your only option, then you'll do everything you can and you'll find a way of making that movement work as well, I'm sure. And nothing's impossible. However, it is a seated practice for me, but doesn't have to be a seated practice for everybody. I will show you, demonstrate sitting down, stand up if you need to, fine. And you can change halfway through. So for example, you might choose to do the first 3 exercises standing. And you might then choose to do the 3 later exercises, the second part, sitting down. And that will be in line with another tradition where this is partly coming through, I think. One of the internal Qigong traditions that I've been part of for 30 odd years. So we're dealing with the Ling. We're dealing with what I call Ling Gong, because I haven't got a better name for it. That's the name that has kind of stuck for the time being so far. We'll see. Maybe today it will get a new name, who knows? And the first three movements are, in fact, movements. There's movement involved, and they are directed towards gallbladder 18, governor vessel 10, and kidney 24. No surprises, folks. Then we go into three static postures, and they are for heart 2, heart 4, and then for bringing the whole thing into a whole, into a collective essential package. And we use the inspiration of the Chinese character, which I'll describe to you again in detail so that you get the component parts and build it up for yourselves in your minds, in your bodies, in your energy field. Folks, without further ado, please make yourself comfortable and settle yourself nicely into your current posture, your current alignment. No need to seek perfection, but certainly examine where everything is at this point, how everything's sitting and aligned with everything else. And the first thing you want to do is to find a comfortable place for your arms to rest. Now, if you're sitting down on a chair, your arms will probably rest on your thighs. Same thing if you're on a stool sitting down. If you're on the floor like I am, you might be more comfortable with your hands, say, in your lap like this. Maybe you want to have them on the dantian. Maybe you want to have one on the chest, one on the arm. Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. For me, this is the thing I usually end up doing. I just rest the backs of my hands on my thighs, near my knees, but not on my knees. That's just me. There's no specific importance attached to that more than it's comfortable. It requires no effort. I have to expend no energy whatsoever. That's the important part. Complete rest, relaxation. It's a nothing position. It's that entering the nothingness that we talked about very briefly before. And yes, maybe there's an aspect of connecting with timelessness in there as well. You'll see that there's a slight relaxation effect going on, but it's nothing that I'm really striving towards. It's just my arms sink down there and feel, no energy, no effort. Good. We're going to use this position, whichever it is for you, and whichever version of it you might find in between each different exercise. We use them as resting positions and as sensing positions after each exercise, so that we give ourselves time to really feel and notice what we've been experiencing. Our first exercise involves a movement that goes out from the body and up. And you'll see that my fingertips don't touch my head, but you may if you wish. No rules about that. There's a movement going outwards and up and to down. It comes down and it launches outwards again. A small amount of effort to get it moving, and then it just folds into this position and touches or doesn't touch, depending on your particular affinity. Gallbladder 18, right at the top there. Cheng Ling supporting the Ling, or Ling supporting. We don't know. We don't need to know, but you might sense something about it that has some kind of importance or meaning for you. It might come in the form of an image, a sensation, a memory, or just a feeling somewhere or other, or even an idea of something. All levels are perfectly relevant. We don't know how the Ling will communicate with us until it does so. No need to limit anything. Keep the perception as open as possible. And just see what happens. See what comes to you. There are no set numbers. You don't have to do this a certain number of times or a certain number of breaths or anything like that. So I tend to do it until I feel like, yeah, it's about enough. And then I stop. And then I go back to my comfortable position, or whichever comfortable position I feel like, and it's usually more or less same. In my case, that's just me. You might choose a different one each time. No problem at all. And I just sense, I just slip into this absolute nothing position where I don't have to do anything, be anything, say anything, think anything. Just is. You might be thinking all sorts of things. That's fine. But you don't have to. And that's our first of 6 exercises completed. As you see, very simple and not particularly irksome or tiring. Until you do 15, 20 of them, then you might start getting tired. Our next exercise relates to the point on the back. If you remember, it's level with the tip of the shoulder blade in this position here, going into the spine, finding the 7th vertebra, and then just above it is governor vessel 10, Ling Tai, Ling Tower, platform, or plateau. Let's see, shall we? The movement begins thrusting gently forwards, and then wings fold behind you, and your thumbs, the tips of your thumbs, touch the spine in approximately that area. It doesn't have to be exact. You're never going to be 100% exact. Don't worry about it. Fold your wings back to the front and then open them again to the back. Make an elegant, wide, and graceful movement. There is some power in the movement, but there's no force. The power comes from the curve and from the spiral inside the movement, and then the touch of the thumbs on the spine or near the spine, somewhere close by. And then a graceful folding back out again. Again, no particular set number of repetitions or set number of breaths, no particular alignment of in-breath with this part of the movement, out-breath with that part of the movement. Allow your breath to be completely spontaneous and free. Allow it to adjust and flexibly move itself around the movement and vice versa. Allow the movement to adjust itself around the breath, but do it in a natural, easy and spontaneous manner. No need to arrange anything or push anything into any specific place. I'm going to rest my arms now back into my comfortable position and encourage you to do likewise. And sensing just for a moment or two any effects, general or specific, encouraged or aroused or created by that movement. It may be physical, maybe emotional. It could be conceptual, mental. It could be on a spiritual level. It could be all of those things or none of the above. No need to even bother categorizing anything. Everything is allowed. And we go to our third movement, which unsurprisingly is almost the exact opposite of the second movement, right? Kidney 24 at the front of the body, from the divot in the chest, up one space and out. But you don't even need to know exactly where it is, because we have the advantage here of 3 fingers landing in those intercostal spaces in between the nipple or breast, as it were, and the breastbone on the kidney meridian, and relax. And then wings opening wide and landing softly in that space reserved for those 3 kidney points on the chest. The middle one is the Ling point. You have 2 Shen points either side of a Ling point. It's a quite amazing section of the body there, utterly earmarked for spiritual uses, purposes, by the names of those points. Kidney 23, 24, and 25. 24 is our Ling point, Ling Shu, the Ling ceremonial mound. Some people call it the burial mound. Deborah was one of those who gave us some very interesting meanings for that. But also ceremonial mound, so that we look at the plus side of that, where we can engage with all aspects of the Ling energy through this point, through the heart energy, through the kidney energy, and through the combined energy of Tai Yin in its nodal zone. These 3 highly spiritually named points. There's a wide and gracious movement here. It does have power, but it doesn't have any force. It has a certain softness to it, but it does have this powerful movement within it. Again, deriving from its spiral shape the curves within it. Allow your breath complete freedom. Allow the movement to have its own rhythm, intrinsic and spontaneous, authentic from within you. Right now, you're probably following my rhythm, my pace to some extent. You don't have to. And when you do your own practice, if you care to practice this for yourself afterwards, do it as quickly or as slowly as you like. That will be different every time you practice. Sometimes a little bit faster if your pulse is higher. Sometimes a bit slower if you're more relaxed or slower or sleepier. No problem. Your pace is your pace for the day. Let's do one more of these Ling Shu exercises and allow our hands to relax into whichever position you feel like relaxing into. Remember, the only important thing is no effort, no energy expended, just rest, just space. So far, we've done 3 exercises where there was movement involved. We leave the movement aspect now. We move more into the alignment and postural part of holding positions, which hopefully are not too arduous. We move into our first position. It's a very, very simple and very easy one, both simple and easy, hopefully for most of you. I just move my arms out to the knees, and you can see that I'm putting the small intestine meridian on my knees, which opens quite wide, building a large circle through the arms and fingers. That's an interesting thing. It's a very important thing. And that circle goes behind the shoulder blades. It goes through the chest and it goes across the front of the chest. All of those levels are included in this circle, and both directions are equally important. This is to open heart 2, just up here, 4 fingers up from the elbow tip there, that spinal process there, 4 fingers up, and in that very soft tissue there, you can see the biceps is here, just below there, in that very soft tissue. And you can see the posture is a very simple one, but it opens that area very, very gently. My fingers are quite straight, but very relaxed. Palms are quite open, but relaxed. There's a sense of continuity going around between the fingers to keep the circles going. No need to labor that point at all. Just set it up, let it go. Blue, green, Ling, Qingling. Perhaps the color of alchemy. Perhaps the color of that efficacy of gods and spirit of kings. The way of arranging things perfectly, like Matthew was referring to, that absolute synchronicity beyond time and perfect timing. Perhaps it's to do with that special part, the palace with that special panoramic view. Perhaps it's to do with the Ling Plateau or the Ling Tower. Only you can know for sure. Eyes open, closed, whichever you wish. Breathing in, nose, out, nose, mouth, however you like. Allow the breathing to sort itself out completely spontaneously. No need to regulate anything. Tongue as you wish, up, down, side. Here we're not concerned about those kind of guidelines, which are very important in some practices, not here. Here is perfect minimalism. A simple position and nothing else. And after a certain point, after a certain number of whatevers, my body says, yep, I'm done, thank you. And I move back into my resting position. If you want to stay a little bit longer, that's fine. No problem at all. If you're already very tired and you want to get into your resting position before I say so, just go ahead and do that. This is a practice with very, very few rules, hardly any regulations, and just a few guidelines. Our resting position requires only that we find the most relaxing and least arduous posture available to us. Maximum conservation of energy, optimal focus on process, unfolding. No filters, no lenses. We're moving on to our 5th exercise. It's another posture. And for this one, we open the arms gently so that the palms face forwards and slightly downwards. And that's, of course, to open up heart 4, which is just up from the wrist here, just a couple of, like a centimeter and a half or something like that. It's 1.5 cun. So you can measure from heart 7, little finger, little finger, little finger, and you're right there on heart 4. Ling, Dao, ladies and gentlemen, the way of the Ling. You can see it's another very simple posture, involves another circle. This one also going through the chest. Every aspect of the chest is involved. The shoulders are invested, of course. And there's this slight turn of the palms forwards, quite open again in the palms. Fingers are quite straight, you'll notice, but very relaxed. And again, this continuum of energy going through the hands and around to create these circles. Once you've done it, leave it. No need to invest too much focus or energy in that. Simply reflect on the process that you're involved with, whatever is unfolding for you. And it could be absolutely minimal, nothing. It could be all sorts of kaleidoscope images flooding through your consciousness. It is what it is. Eyes open or closed, tongue up or down, breathing nose, mouth, not breathing at all. Maybe your skin is doing the breathing. Maybe your back is breathing. Maybe your feet are breathing. Maybe your palms are breathing. Maybe you're breathing through your ears and your eyeballs. Not for me to say. And after a certain point, some kind of signal comes from your body, either as satisfaction or pain or just, well, that's enough. You return to your relaxing position or to a new relaxing position. The only criteria is that it costs you nothing. You may notice that you're being able to bring attention to different parts of your posture and alignment as we go through these exercises. That's wonderful if that's the case. Nothing you need to force, of course. Just allow that to unfold by itself. But of course, notice whatever's going on for you at all levels, if possible. One final exercise, folks. It's a posture, static one. Our arms move out to the sides, turn upwards, and we find ourselves in the final Ling posture, palms facing heaven, and we recall the Chinese character of the Ling, where the upper part of the character symbolizes precipitation, or more accurately, energies moving from up to down. There are natural examples of this: rain, fog, snow, lightning, thunder, etc., etc., etc. But that's not the essential thing. The essential thing is the energy of the above. In the middle of the Chinese character are those 3 boxes. Are they gifts wrapped nicely for us? Presents from the Ling, from the universe? Could be. Are they entryways or exits for us to enter or exit from into different dimensions? Could easily be, right? Are they mouths open in awe? Perfectly possible. With the Ling we're dealing with here, folks. Nothing is off the table. The lowest part of the Chinese character is the shaman, him or herself. That's you at this point. So welcome to your spot, your personal place within the enormous phenomena that is Ling, the vast, unfathomable expanse in time and space that defies all definition. Ling, or rei in Japanese. The Japanese also call it tamashi. It's the word they use when they use their own native pronunciation of these things. Rei is their version of Ling, the Chinese word. And as we wrap up the practice by returning to our simple seated or standing position with our arms resting without effort, without expense of energy. Simply taking stock of the moment, allowing whatever's unfolding to unfold in full view of your total consciousness, unlimited by preconceptions, ideas of good or bad, right or wrong, who said what and when, all gone. Pure experience, ready for your use or interpretation, or just to be. I'm going to move slowly now out of this position, back to my little moving stool there, and back to the computer screen. I'll raise the screen and address you again from there if there are any questions, especially regarding the practice, but anything else, feedback, epiphanies, whatever, bring it on. And if we have time, maybe I'll read that poem that I wrote in around that same phase. All this stuff is going on with the Qigong form, the Ling figurine, and the blue-green shirt. Let's see. So it looks like most of the people survived. That's good. Pierce is unaccounted for, visually speaking, but that's fine. Cordula as well. Let's see. Usually she makes it through most of my practices. Let's see. She might have drifted off, of course.
I'm here, but
Hey.
I don't manage to switch on my camera again.
Okay. All right.
Switch it off because it was had this weird movement.
Oh.
But now I don't know. Oh,
Well, we can hear you clearly enough. We could anyway. So folks, that's the Lingon. It's recorded now for posterity, and you'll receive it probably, knowing Wayne's efficiency, within days. Brian as well. Simple enough. Now posted. Well, you see, it's there already. The slide handout is there. There's Cordula coming in with her psychedelic view of life. So
I switch off my camera again because it's disturbing.
okay. Very good.
Pierce has a comment in chat.
Yeah. So the Qigong form is there for you, Pierce. Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's right there. Just practice it and use it for whatever you need to use it for. The book is available as an ebook. It's available as an audio book from the usual suspects, Amazon, all those kind of crooks and gangsters. The paper book is due out any time, and my publisher and I are getting on each other's nerves now, in like impatient waiting for it to come. Any day soon is what I can tell you, and I will of course be blasting that news out on Facebook and Instagram to the limits of my powers once it happens. So hopefully you'll get wind of it through Brian or somebody else at the very least. But keep your eyes open. The Poetry of Touch, you could check in anytime within the next week or so, and your usual suppliers should have it, Barnes and Noble and all these kind of people. So that's the book part of things. It's a big A4 size chunky book. It's got what I anyway think is quite a beautiful cover. So hopefully it'll be an object that you'll value and have great joy of just holding. That's the idea. It should have an energy of its own. And I'll say this about it. Please read it in any order you fancy. Don't feel constrained by reading from the front cover to the back cover. That's not the way this book is intended to be read. You can do that. Of course you can. And some people will. That's great. Other people will just open it randomly anywhere, from the back to the front, sideways, upside down, standing on your head, hanging from the ceiling. Everything goes, folks. It's there as a resource to inspire you and to bring your creative sources into operation. So any way you want to interact with that book is absolutely fine by me. The freer, the better.
Did you want to say anything about the other contents in the book?
Well, it's a long, long story. It's a book written in sections, and halfway through the book, there's a section about the meridians, and that section is all about the flow and different takes on the meridian system, and also different takes on specific meridians. There's a whole chapter on the gallbladder, for example, who I call the maestro. There's a whole chapter on the lung and large intestine meridians, in conjunction with the wood element and the liver and large intestine, liver and the gallbladder meridians. These are things that I wanted to dust off and bring out into the light. These are specific things that I want to discuss that I think don't get discussed enough. And the book is full of that kind of stuff. Things that I think don't get discussed enough are discussed a lot in my book. So there's all sorts of angles that you might not encounter in other books. And hopefully this will be a great complement to all of your other reading, all the other textbooks you have, all your teachers who've got all sorts of insights and wisdom. And this will be just filling in some of the gaps and giving you context and like big view of things, but also deep dive, detailed view of things. So there's one chapter there, and it's called Guardians of Creativity. And that's one of the things that the large intestine and lung do in their role as representatives of the Po energy, the animal soul, the corporeal soul, and their relationship to the ethereal soul, the Hun, which the liver and gallbladder, of course, represent in the body and in the mind and in the spirit. And the relationship between those two in the middle of the night is, of course, that the creative work gets done through the Hun, and then the structuring of the work gets done in the Po. And I woke up one night about, well, I guess 7-8 years ago, with a perfect, for me, structure for the book from this dream sequence and from this film that was being shown me in my consciousness. I was awake at the time, but it came through the dream work. And it showed me how to put all my disparate pieces of work together in one structure. And that's the structure I stayed with. I filled it out a little bit. I changed it around a tiny, tiny bit, but basically it was there whole. All I had to do was fit the content into the structure, and it worked for me pretty nicely. So you can read all about that. It's in the book, halfway through the section on meridians.
Awesome. Okay, so we ran over time, but I saw no reason to stop the party. But now we have to stop the party. Wayne has to go to a meeting later.
All right.
And I just want to thank you, Chris, for sharing all that with us. That was wonderful. And right after we stop recording, the Zoom recording should be available, and Wayne put the PDF there.
Right.
And we'll also upload it to our YouTube channel with a link to the PDF, and then eventually get it into our academy. So
Great.
Thank you again, and thanks for everybody that attended. We can stop recording now.
All right.